2020 zoning hearing officer meeting. And I'm Lisa Grote. I'm the San Mateo County zoning hearing officer. And before we start each meeting, we do begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I'm going to ask Deb Robinson to lead us in the pledge. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Deb. Today, we have two items on the agenda. Before we get into those items, however, we do have an opportunity for oral communications. If there's anyone here who would like to speak on oral communications or under oral communications, and that would be something about something that's not on the agenda this morning, if you could let me know. All right, and not seeing anyone who wants to speak under oral communications, I'm going to go ahead and start with item number 1. Today's meeting setup is a little different. We are on a Zoom meeting rather than a webinar. So after the project manager, a project planner, gives his staff report and recommendation, I am going to ask that you somehow notify me that you do want to speak on this item. And Janeth, I may need a little help from you because there are several people on the call or in the meeting to identify who wants to speak to this item. But let's get through the staff report first and recommendation, and then we will figure out how we want to, how we will identify people who want to speak. So thank you. I'll start by saying it's the owner, San Mateo County Harbor District. The applicant is Bradley Damitz or Demitz. File number is PLN 2020-00168. The location is 1 Johnson Pier in Half Moon Bay, and the assessor's parcel number is 047-083-060. And Lawrence Trong has been the project planner, and he'll start with his staff report and recommendation. Lawrence?
Good morning, Lisa. Thank you. Share my screen.
Okay.
I believe I'm now sharing my screen.
You are, yes, thanks.
This is item 1. And Lisa's already mentioned all this on the screen, so I'll move on to the next screen. This project requires a coastal development permit and use permit to allow temporary seasonal staging of commercial crab fishing gear and trailers with fishing nets, salmon fishing nets on trailers that are typically associated with transient fishing vessels, and temporary storage of recovered crab fishing gear located in parking lot C2, which includes a total of 63 parking spaces of Pillar Point Harbor in Princeton. Aside from temporary chain link fencing installed to secure recovered gear until it is either claimed by its owner or sold or salvaged, no structural development is proposed. Typically, the crab season runs from November to June, and the salmon season runs from May to November. Additionally, the Half Moon Bay Lost Fishing Gear Recovery Program recovers crab gear from the ocean water around Half Moon Bay beginning in late May until late October. This is a location map of the subject parcel highlighted in yellow, which is approximately 11.9 acres in size and is located off Pillar Point Harbor Boulevard. Property is within the Cabrillo Highway / Highway 1 County Scenic Corridor and is visible along Cabrillo Highway / Highway 1. Proposed staging area would be located in lot C2 here, which includes 63 parking spaces. The surrounding area consists of additional parking lots associated with Pillar Point Harbor, including parking lot C1 with 143 parking spaces and parking lot C3 with 71 parking spaces, both consisting of boat trailer parking and standard vehicle public parking. This is a picture of proposed activity at lot C2. Crab Crab gear staging and temporary net trailer storage have traditionally occurred for at least 25 to 30 years at the exact same location, while the crab gear recovery program has operated annually since 2015. Project conforms with the following policies. Policy 4.22 scenic corridors of the general plan. The project does not involve any proposed structural development. The operation will be located approximately 100 feet to the south of Highway 1, with several mature trees partially screening the project parcel from viewpoints along Highway 1. Additionally, the project lot sits approximately 18 feet lower in elevation than the highway, which helps to minimize views of the staged fishing gear. The gear staging is considered to be customary to what is expected to be observed in association with an active commercial fishing harbor area, such as Pillar Point Harbor. Thus, the operation would not impact the visual quality of scenic corridors. The project also conforms with multiple local coastal program policies, including Policy 1.1, Coastal Development Permit. A CDP is being sought with this application. Policy 8.12B seeks to ensure development does not block ocean views from public viewing points, such as public roads and publicly owned lands. As mentioned previously, the parking lot project area sits approximately 18 feet lower in elevation than Highway 1. Therefore, the temporarily stored fishing gear will not block views from Highway 1. Policy 10.1 and 10.13 requires some shoreline access provision as a condition of granting development permits for any public or private development between the sea and the nearest road. Numerous existing walkways and trails throughout the harbor provide access to the shoreline. The project does not impede or obstruct existing lateral or vertical shoreline access or existing trails throughout the harbor facilities. Policy 10.22C1 and 10.22D, 20% of the 550 parking spaces, which is 110 parking spaces, associated with the harbor facility shall be available for shoreline access. The two adjacent C parking lots I showed earlier, C1 and C3, provide a total of 138 standard parking spaces available for public day use, including shoreline access. Policy 11.7C seeks to permit uses in coastside commercial recreation areas which, 1, serve primarily visitors or boating and fishing, 2, contribute to the creation of a coastally related commercial area or would uniquely enhance coastal recreation at that location, and 3, are pedestrian or boat oriented. The project includes allowing temporary seasonal staging of fishing gear that directly supports commercial fishing within Pillar Point Harbor. The project conforms with the following zoning regulations. Permitted use. Project is located within the Coastside Commercial Recreation, CCR, zoning district, which prioritizes uses supporting coastside visitors, boat users, and coastside recreation, which the proposed seasonal staging activity supports. For development standards, a CCR zoning development standards for coastal areas and protection of coastal resources, section 62691.1 and 62692 respectively, requires development to comply with the shoreline access component and sensitive habitats and visual resources components of the local coastal program. The project entails temporary seasonal staging of fishing gear within an existing paved parking lot that sits approximately 18 feet below the adjacent Highway 1 right-of-way, and therefore will not result in any public view impacts to the ocean. Additionally, since the project is confined to limited space within an existing paved parking lot, there will be no impacts to sensitive habitats or public access to or along the shoreline. Under parking standards, as mentioned previously, Pillar Point Harbor has at least a total of 550 parking spaces approved to support the harbor. The C parking lots, C1, C2, and C3, contain a total of 277 parking spaces, of which 139 are large trailer spaces. The project will temporarily use parking lot C2, which contains 63 parking spaces, of which 28 are large trailer parking spaces and 35 are regular parking spaces. Based on the current assessment, there will be well over the approved number of spaces provided throughout the various parking lots within the harbor facility parcels, and therefore, staff believes adequate parking remains throughout the harbor properties to compensate for any temporary loss of parking associated with continued use of lot C2 during the crab and salmon seasons. Under the use permit pursuant to section 6267 of the CCR zoning standards, a use permit is required for alteration of or change in the occupancy of or use of a structure. While seasonal staging will be located in parking lot C2, Pillar Point Harbor maintains numerous parking lots which are sufficient for serving the needs of the harbor. The location of these parking spaces that will be used for seasonal gear staging within parking lot C2 will not obstruct or impact vehicle access or maneuvering to adjacent parking lots. The project conforms to the applicable development standards in section 6269 of the CCR zoning district regulations. There is no evidence that the continued use of parking lot C2 as proposed will have any detrimental effect upon coastal resources or result in adverse impacts to properties or improvements in the area, as the project will not obstruct ocean views, will not have impacts on the sensitive habitats, and will not significantly impact the parking supply for the harbor or impede existing public access to or along the shoreline. The purpose and benefit of the project is to meet a need of the commercial fishing community, as the project directly supports commercial fishing users at Pillar Point Harbor and is customary to the sort of activity that is expected to occur at an active fishing harbor. The California Coastal Commission had a comment and recommends alternative parking be provided elsewhere to not impact shoreline access parking. As mentioned previously, 20% of the 550 parking spaces, which is 110 parking spaces associated with harbor facility, shall be available for shoreline access. The two adjacent C parking lots, C1 and C3, provide 138 standard parking spaces available for public day use, including shoreline access. For environmental review, this project is categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, guidelines pursuant to section 15301, class 1, for operation of existing public or private facilities involving negligible or no expansion of existing or former use. For recommendations and findings under the coastal development permit, the project as described in application and accompanying materials required by section 6328.7 of zoning regulations and as conditioned in accordance with section 6328.14 conforms to plans, policies, requirements, and standards of San Mateo County Local Coastal Program, specifically in regard to locating and planning new development, visual resources, shoreline access, and recreation/visitor serving facilities components of the LCP. The project is located in an urban area designated coastside commercial recreation, serves to support commercial fishing community, will not block ocean views from public viewpoints due to area's topography, and will not significantly impact harbor district's parking supply, including parking for shoreline access or existing access to or along shoreline. The project is located between nearest public road, Cabrillo Highway or Highway 1, and the sea, thus is subject to public access and public recreation policies of Chapter 3 of the Coastal Act of 1976. The project complies with public access and recreation requirements as it will not obstruct or impede existing shoreline access within harbor and directly supports commercial fishing at Pillar Point Harbor. The project conforms to specific findings required by policies of San Mateo County LCP with regard to locating and planning new development, visual resources, shoreline access, and recreation/visitor serving facilities. For the use permit, design and operation of proposed use will further the purpose of CCR zoning district as stated in section 6265, as the project serves a need of commercial fishing community at Pillar Point Harbor, while continuing to provide safe, accessible, and adequate parking throughout the harbor. Design and operation of proposed use will conform with development standards stated in section 6269 of the CCR zoning district, since project conforms to standards for coastal access and protection of coastal resources based on project's compliance with relevant shoreline access component and visual resources components of the LCP. The establishment, maintenance, and or conducting of use will not, under the circumstances of the particular case, result in a significant adverse impact to coastal resources or be detrimental to public welfare or injurious to property or improvements in said neighborhood, since there is no evidence to suggest that the proposed project, as conditioned and approved, will have any detrimental effect upon coastal resources or result in adverse impacts to properties or improvements in the area, as project will not obstruct ocean views, impact sensitive habitat, significantly impact parking supply for a harbor, or impede existing public access. Furthermore, the project meets a need of the commercial fishing community. Staff recommends that the zoning hearing officer approve the coastal development permit and use permit, county file number PLN 2020-00168, by making the required findings and adopting conditions of approval. And that concludes my staff report presentation.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence. Janice, if you can help me identify who might like to speak to this. I think I will ask, though, Mr. Demitz, Brad Demitz, if you would like to add anything to Lawrence's report.
Thank you, Lisa. This is Brad Damitz, and I, on behalf of the Harbor District, was the one who worked with Lawrence on submitting the application. I think he did a really nice job on the staff report and presentation with the details. I don't really have anything to add. Just wanting to emphasize that, this has been an activity that's been ongoing, at least at the crab pot storage, for 25 or 30 years, and it's something that the commercial fishermen really rely on. And in fact, the Harbor District didn't know that it was against the regulations in the LCP until last year, which is why we're applying and trying to get it done correctly and get the permit for it. So other than that, I don't have anything to add. I just wanted to be here to answer any questions that might come up.
Okay, great. Thank you. There might be a couple of questions as we determine who might want to speak to this item. Thank you. Okay, now I see a number of people in the meeting, and I cannot tell who would like to speak to this item because we do not, unfortunately, have a raise hand feature for this meeting. So I am going to have to ask if our Zoom expert, Janeth, has an idea about how we might be able to identify who would like to speak to this particular item.
Fortunately, I do not. The only way would be for them to unmute their mics, and you can see kind of like the box slide up. There's like a green. So I think if anybody wants to speak, they can kind of turn their mics on, and then we can kind of gauge who wants to speak on the item and then call on them by that.
Okay. How about if then I ask anyone who would like to speak to this item, if you turn your mute button off, and I will be able to see that your mute button is off, and then I can start to call on names of anyone who would like to speak. Okay.
And I don't see any.
I don't either. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thank you then very much. I did have two quick questions. One is for Lawrence, and that is on the conditions of approval. Condition number one, for use permits, we frequently have a time frame for a use permit. It's good for X number of years, and then it's come back to be renewed. I didn't see that for this particular use permit. Were you intending that this will be for an indefinite period of time? So it will carry on as an approved use pretty much in perpetuity?
Yes, I believe so. I believe that's the intention of the.
Okay. Okay. And then given that, there would still be, if for some reason conditions weren't applied or weren't conformed with, the county could still be working with the applicant and the Harbor District to correct any problems out there if for some reason conditions weren't applied correctly.
Yeah, yes, the department would, I'm pretty sure Brad would agree that we would work together on anything that is not in compliance.
Okay, great. And then just lastly, this will pretty much be a year-round activity because there are the two different seasons, one from, I guess, May to November and then November to June.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And it's been occurring for the last 30 to 35 years, and to anyone's knowledge, hasn't had a negative impact on parking for the general public or other uses out there.
That's right. So it probably 25 to 30 years is what I've been told. I think that's as long as the parking lot has been there, and it's just always been an accepted use. And I haven't heard of any complaints or people either complaining or having that restrict the parking for the other uses for the harbor. There's plenty of parking for trailers and for the boat launch ramp. And the nice thing is that the salmon season usually doesn't overlap with the crab, when the crab pots are being stored. So at the times when that real demand for the parking is there, would be different times from when the crab pots are being staged.
Okay, great.
I would also
Okay.
like to add, Lisa, that I do not believe the county has received any complaints either about these activities.
Okay, great, great. Okay, thank you. Thank you both. Well, then, seeing that there are no members of the public who want to speak to this item, and you answered my questions, both Mr. Damitz and Lawrence, I'm going to go ahead and approve this application in accordance with the findings and conditions in the staff report. And there is an appeal period of 10 working days. So if anyone did want to appeal this decision, they have until January 4th because of the holidays, January 4th of 2021 to appeal the decision. And there is a $616.35 appeal fee. But after that January 4th, 2021 date, the approval does become formalized. So I want to thank you both very much, and we'll close item 1.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, our second item on today's agenda is owner 2021 Wai Ying LLC. The applicant is Ryan Lay. The file number is PLN 2020-00097. The location is 20 Dexter Avenue in North Fair Oaks, and the assessor's parcel number is 060-273-140. And Kanoa Kelly is the project planner, and Kanoa is going to start with a brief overview and staff recommendation. Kanoa?
Thanks, Lisa, and good morning, everybody. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so as we said before, this is item number 2 for the consideration of a minor subdivision to subdivide a 11,744 square foot parcel into 4 townhouse parcels and 1 common interest parcel, or sorry, 11,780 square foot parcel into 4 townhouse units, 1 common interest parcel at 20 Dexter Avenue in the North Fair Oaks area. The project also includes the removal of 1 redwood tree. So let's take a look where it is. This is at 20 Dexter Avenue, North Fair Oaks, between El Camino Real and Waverly Avenue. And here's a slide that shows the zoning of the area. You can see all of the commercial areas facing El Camino, NMU, ECR, and then behind it is R1. This particular parcel is located in the R3 S5 district, which is a multifamily designation. And here you can kind of see it. It's hard to see from the street view there, but it's tucked away back there. There's a long driveway, and it's currently being used as a triplex. So you can see this is the parcel here, and they're going to subdivide it into these 4 different townhouse units. And then there's the parcel A, which is the common area, which is the shared access. Here we can see the elevations. So these will be they're all 3-bedroom townhomes. It's going to be a 3-story development. You can see the height is 34 feet 3 inches, and they are attached, primarily clad in stucco, and it would be white stucco and a natural finish hardy board siding and some stone accents. So let's go over the project compliance. As you can see in the table, the project meets all of the S5 development standards, including the minimum lot area per dwelling unit on the parcel. It complies with the county subdivision regulations and all applicable provisions of the Subdivision Map Act, and all subdivision findings can be made as as detailed in the staff report. So the project is categorically exempt pursuant to CEQA guidelines for Class 15 related to minor subdivisions of the land. We have received correspondence. Unfortunately, because of scheduling conflicts, this project was unable to go to the North Fair Oaks Community Council meeting. But we have received correspondence from the North Fair Oaks Community Council members that they would like to have this on their agenda in January. So because of that, the staff's recommendation is this zoning hearing officer proceed with the public hearing to allow interested parties the opportunity to comment on the project, but continue consideration of the minor subdivision PLN 2020-00097 to February 4th to allow for review by the North Fair Oaks Community Council on January 28th. So that concludes my quick overview of the project and the presentation, and I can open it up to any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kanoa. Is the project applicant at the meeting, and would he like to say anything or make any further comments?
Yeah, hi Lisa. Hello?
Yes, hi, I can hear you.
This is Ryan. I'm just under my dad's name, so I'm here with my family. Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, yeah, Kano did a really good job. I don't really have anything to add. The rest of the design team is actually here, the architect and the civil engineer. So if we have questions, we can open it up to them.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, now, and if Kanoa, you wouldn't mind unsharing your screen.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, thanks. And then I can see who else is at the meeting and whether or not, okay. Now, if there is anyone here who would like to speak to this item, you can unmute your microphone and then I'll be able to see if you would like to speak, and then I can call on names. Oh, okay, I see Kent Mansky,
thank you.
Mansky, thank you. Mr. Mansky, if you'd like to make some any comments or have any questions.
Yes, the first thing I'll do here is just read a letter that I sent to the zoning hearing officer, and then I'll articulate some things further. And here's the letter. I have been a resident of the Selby Park neighborhood, Dunbarton Oaks on the county maps, for 28 years. During this time, the house at 20 Dexter fit into our neighborhood aesthetically and provided us good neighbors. This proposal is not respectful of the neighborhood. The project, in quotes, under consideration, is an aesthetically blocky structure uncharacteristic of the neighborhood. The excessive height is disrespectful to the rest of the neighborhood and seems more suitable for housing on El Camino Real than in this neighborhood, which is the only North Fair Oaks R1 neighborhood west of Middlefield Road. The structure's location, and therefore its front yard, fails miserably to integrate into the neighborhood by pushing the building as close to the property's front property line as allowed. This design has zero consideration for neighborhood sight lines, including its relationship to other neighborhood front yards, particularly as you approach the Dexter Avenue curve from the direction of Waverly Avenue. Instead of integrating with the neighborhood and its homes, one encounters a massive structure that doesn't seem part of the neighborhood. It feels like a cut and paste structure plopped in the neighborhood by someone who has never visited the neighborhood, has never asked questions about how it could fit in, benefit, or serve a neighborhood. With this letter, I request the developer of San Mateo County Planning and Building to please understand the relationship that this property has to the neighborhood and advance decisions that integrate with our neighborhood rather than negatively affect it. That right there was my first issue, and that has to do with the aesthetics of the project. The second issue that I raise in this letter, and I will read, we are deeply concerned with the future health of the redwood trees as a result of the close proximity of the proposed driveway, which from my unprofessional reading of the plans doesn't list anything about being permeable. These trees, especially in drought, need to absorb rainwater that soaks into the ground and nourishes their roots. The proposed impermeable driveway and proposed drainage system will severely restrict the water these trees depend on to survive. This is the responsibility of the developer and San Mateo County Planning and Building to seriously evaluate. A permeable driveway should be able to meet fire apparatus requirements. And I conclude that sentence by saying, please do not assign our neighborhood redwood trees a death sentence. The third issue that I raised in the letter is something that you addressed earlier and now have scheduled for the Fair Oaks Community Council. And I think I'll just read my paragraph because it explains why this is really important. I am extremely disappointed that this project did not first go through the North Fair Oaks Community Council before this zoning hearing. To be honest, I'm a little ashamed that a decision was made to bypass community knowledge and input. This is specifically important during a pandemic, when many of our citizen teachers and first responders need more help, not less help, to maintain our engagement as community members. The North Fair Oaks Community Council is where our community learns about, discusses, and evaluates the impact of important decisions that affect our whole community, not just a neighborhood, our whole community. I believe that no decision should be made as a result of this zoning hearing until it is first presented at the North Fair Oaks Community Council public meeting. And I understand that you have addressed that. So I just wanted on record that a citizen and those I have spoken to in the neighborhood were quite upset that this process was, in our opinion, violated. So on that note, my letter here talked about aesthetics, it talked about the health of the redwood trees, and it talked about community decisions. And I would like to just now conclude this part of my questioning and welcome feedback on those issues.
Okay. Okay.
And I will unmute myself.
Okay.
I will mute myself.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Mansky. I appreciate those comments, and we will come back to them. I do see someone else who would like to comment, and I'd like to get his comments, and then we can kind of circle back and talk about the issues that you've raised, and the fact that we do have an opportunity to continue this hearing. So there'll be more time in the future as well to discuss some of these issues. So I see a David Barris who would like to speak. Is that correct?
That's right. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can. You're a little soft, so maybe if you could speak up a little bit, that'd be great.
Okay.
Great,
All right.
thank you.
Yeah, my name's David Barris, and I live at 50 Dexter, not far from the project. And I've been here for over 30 years with my wife. And I'm also a retired general contractor / designer for, was involved in that business for 41 years. Kent, I wrote a whole bunch of notes here, and they were about basically the looks of the project, the trees, and then the North Fair Oaks Community Council, which I was going to talk about. So I kind of want to reiterate what he says about that. But I'll just, a couple extra things that I wanted to talk about was how disappointed I am in the looks of the structure. To me, once again, it looks like something that belongs on El Camino Real. And it looks like a very commercial looking structure. I mean, it's a rectangle that's 34 feet high, and it's got a low sloping roof, and it looks design wise looks cheap. And I'm very disappointed because it's something that doesn't belong in this residential neighborhood, which has approximately 100 houses in it, and they're all individuals, and there's houses, and there's a few duplexes. So that's one thing. That's how I feel about the looks of the structure. I understand. I wanted to talk also about the trees, the redwood trees, and the other trees on the property. And I understand that there's been an arborist consulted about a removal of a large unhealthy tree, and I'm a redwood tree, and I'm concerned about that because I don't know if you know or not, but last summer the owner cut down a heritage redwood 30-inch diameter tree without approval or permit from the county, and they got caught. Because we caught them, myself and two other neighbors. So I'm concerned about when they say they're going to cut down another redwood tree. I'm very concerned. Let's see. And the last thing I wanted to mention was the hardscape, which I guess Kent mentioned too, but it's about the amount has there been a study from the arborist concerning the needed ample water getting to the redwood trees and the other trees on the property, being that now it's going to be covered with a structure as well as a hardscape driveway. So those items, before there was a lot of open space to where the trees had the available water for their roots. Now a lot of that is going to be covered up. So that's basically what I have had to say, and those are my concerns.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Barras. And you can go ahead and mute yourself again. So then, and we will again circle back and talk about your concerns along with Mr. Mansky's. But is there anyone else who would like to speak to this item before we start addressing some of these concerns? Okay, I don't see anyone else who has unmuted themselves. So I will ask if either Kanoa or the applicant, or if you've got your arborist here, if you would like to speak to, or if you can, please speak to the tree concerns, both the planting, where the trees are planted, the permeability of that area, and the health of the trees and the tree that is proposed for removal. Is there someone who can speak to that? I'll start with the applicant. Yeah.
I believe if Tim is here, he's the civil engineer on the project. He would be the most knowledgeable about that.
Okay, and I see that's Tim Heffernan. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I can speak to kind of the civil aspects. I'm not qualified to, speak to the health of the tree or the arborist topics or items, but I know they have reviewed the plans and drawings and gave recommendations for preserving the existing trees.
Okay. Kanoa, do you have anything to add to that in terms of the arborist report?
Yeah, so there is an arborist report. The one tree, so there's quite a few trees on this. There's a very large canopy on the site. And they're trying to preserve as many as possible while still maximizing the space for the units. So there's only one tree that is in poor condition according to the arborist report, and because of the proximity to the building, should be removed. That was the arborist recommendation. And as far as the driveway is going in at the same site where the existing driveway is. They have recommended maximum excavation depth of the driveway when it's replaced. There are some roots that are going into the driveway, and any root cutting will be supervised by the arborist in the driveway. But those are the recommendations from the arborist as far as the maximum depth to minimize impacts to the trees, and they're not being removed.
Okay. Can we make, before we do come back on February 4th, can we make that arborist report available to the two speakers and to myself as well?
Yes, I can send that over to everybody. And
Okay,
I will include it as an attachment to the staff report.
okay, that would be great. That would be great. And I noticed Mr. Mansky has unmuted himself, so I think he has some additional comments or questions. Mr. Mansky?
Yes. As Lisa asked you when you came on, could you identify which tree is deemed unhealthy?
So there are, let's see, a total of 38 trees identified, and the tree number, let's see. 27. So I have the arborist report here, and I can show you. Let me share my screen with you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay. So here's the site here, and then there's this one tree, number 28, that will be removed on the right side of the property.
Okay, it's kind of down at the bottom of the screen. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, right here.
Okay.
That will be very helpful for us to look at, and also to hire an arborist if we feel this is for the benefit of the project and not actually for reasons that are critical. And I share with you that our concern is only that we see a long history of trees getting cut down for projects. We also have unfortunate situations like in Menlo Park, where recently trees had to come down because they were affecting the garage that was built long after the trees were planted. And the unfortunate part is the planning of the building didn't really assess the fact that trees grow. Mm-hmm. And this particular project almost now feels like, because of maximum excavation for the driveway is going to cut roots of redwood trees, 15 of them that have already a shallow root base, is kind of insane. Because what we're doing here is we're saying that, okay, in 30 years and in 50 years, we are going to have a project that requests for trees to be cut down because they're affecting our driveway, and maybe even because of that affecting the foundation of our homes. And we shouldn't be thinking in short term. We should be thinking in long term about the protection of these redwood trees. So the idea of that we're actually cutting roots from this incredibly splendid array of trees in San Mateo County is just really, really wrong. I also want to point out that the tree that was illegally cut down is the location between tree number 8 and 9. And when residents of the neighborhood reached this property, when the chainsaws were going, those chainsaws and those laborers were planning on cutting down all kinds of trees. Neighbors called the sheriff, and then they called the county. The county came before the sheriff, and the county asked them to stop cutting until the trees were marked. And that's where the metal tagging system came into being. And that's why these trees live today. At that meeting, an individual arrived, and she said she was the property owner and was unaware of the fact that they needed permission to cut down trees. Well, she was kindly educated by the county representative that was there. And since that time, we do not know whether there's been any additional shenanigans of our heritage trees that have taken place. But I want to point out that infraction, because that obviously is a history of a property owner coming in and not having respect for these trees. And when you travel down that route that I recommended you travel down to see the effect of this blocky structure in our neighborhood, you see that big gap between 8 and 9. And it's a really unfortunate. It's unfortunate for the whole neighborhood that that tree line has this gap in it. And I do know that as a result of this permit, if it goes through, that you would be required to replace one tree for that existing tree that you are claiming is unhealthy. We also ask you to replace the tree that was illegally cut down before the property, before this obviously development came to the public eye. The last thing I'll point out is it was deeply sad to us after a year of inquiring whether there was any repercussions to the owner as a result of cutting down illegally a heritage tree. It wasn't until a month ago that I finally got a response back from code enforcement that said no such action was taken place because there was no record of this happening. And that's really unfortunate, because San Mateo County was on site that day and saw the removal of one of those trees. So I'll end that, but I just wanted to point out a little bit about a history, and you can understand why this would be of deep concern to a neighborhood regarding responsibility and actually concern for the health of these trees.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for those comments on that history. I did want to clarify one thing, and I think this is for Kanoa as the project planner. I think you had mentioned, and I think it's stated perhaps in the arborist report, that the arborist would be supervising the construction of the driveway and that they would not be cutting roots. Is that a correct understanding, or is that incorrect?
They wouldn't be cutting roots without the supervision of the arborist, so we can identify the impacts to the trees. Again, in the recommendations, he goes into detail about the types of materials that should be placed on the bottom surface of the driveway to minimize impacts. But there will be an arborist on site during the construction of the driveway to make sure that everything is implemented and they can evaluate any impacts to the trees.
Okay.
Lisa,
Okay.
can I share a story with you?
Certainly. Yes.
Right across the street from this property right now is the building of the Sunrise Senior Living.
Okay.
Since the beginning of that project, the neighborhood was deeply involved in the design and layout of that building and its relationship to the neighborhood. Most people still feel it's a much larger than we had expected, but its initial design was a ridiculous assault on the neighborhood. And we really respected their concerns for our concerns. But what I want to share with you is that that same situation was promised us, that the arborist would be on hand, that the contractor was well aware of the heritage trees and how they should be treated. Well, less than a month ago, a 64-inch diameter, not 64, 46-inch diameter live oak had to be cut down because it was systematically trimmed throughout the process of construction, leading to its inevitable death. We have recordings of the initial trimming of that tree and then the subsequent trimming of it until its death. Very, very upsetting. Then a tree was bulldozed accidentally, and the arborist was supposed to be on site that day. And all documentation by the contractor that was provided to us said, we emailed the arborist, we asked him to come, he didn't answer our emails for 5 days, and it accidentally was bulldozed. So here we are. This is not a fantasy of ours. Do we want to protect these trees? We understand mistakes happen, and we need a 100% plan by San Mateo County that these trees will not have their roots impacted. Their future roots will not change the value of this property so that trees have to be removed in the future. This is really important. And this will be, I'm not angry, I'm just communicating.
Right.
If this is not addressed, honestly, by both San Mateo County and the developer, this will be a public relations nightmare because this is a passionate neighborhood. And the reason this screen is not full of people is because it's 10 a.m. and we have working professionals, teachers, first responders who are dealing with a pandemic, not at a zoning meeting, trying to save the integrity of their neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Mansky. I appreciate your comments and your concerns. And we will be talking more about the trees as we go through this process, because this is just the beginning. This is just the first meeting. And so we will be coming back to this issue. And I think when Kanoa can email people who are interested in receiving the arborist report, I think that will go a long way to help inform the conversation. So I think that's an important document for us all to have. I noticed that Eric Kang has unmuted himself. So would you like to speak, Mr. Kang?
Yes, good morning. So I'm the architect for this project.
Okay.
I'm not trying to offend anyone, but a situation like this is always difficult between the owner and the surrounding neighbors. I think the county or city has in a very crucial point to explain, because this is a R3 zone and put it in front of the R1 neighborhood. So what was the intent originally to put an R3 zone in this area? What did the county city expect what kind of building is there? People mention this belongs to El Camino. Then they have a concept to accept El Camino is different than the neighborhood and is not part of the neighborhood. And this building should be in the transition between the El Camino and the neighborhood. People keep saying this is the neighborhood project, but actually physically it's not. So we have to identify exactly what's the role based on city county's direction. What's the limit that we should do? And also for all those trees, this is not a public park. All the trees we're talking about legal. So what's the legal rights for the property owner to cut the trees? I know it's unfortunate that way. I'm just trying to make things clear. What's the legal rights that the owner can cut a tree? The whole country that we wipe out so many acres of nature forest is under the law. So I personally don't like to do that. But when we get to the legal, unlegal, when we're fighting for a project like this, we need to know where the clear line. So the surrounding neighbors we will respect, but we don't go over respect. And hopefully our rights to be respect, even on the way that presented in the meeting. It sounds like we're a criminal, get into this area, try to steal something from the neighborhood. So I hope when we start a project, we don't be treated like that. We have our rights, then we have our design guidelines, and hopefully city can give us a very clear guideline what we exactly can do. So if we get to that point, which we have a well-supported project, that's my point. But I know this is probably a long way to go. We need to work closely with the neighbors to get some input to refine the project. And this is the first round. I really appreciate the two gentlemen that give the comments. I believe by January there are more comments. I will well prepared and probably not going to make any changes until that meeting. But from that point on, hopefully get a clear direction and where we can go to the next.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Kang. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that. Yeah, I appreciate it. I did want to, and actually that was the second question that I wanted to address briefly, because this is just the first hearing. So briefly, the design standards in the area, and maybe Kanoa, you can speak to that, design review, whether or not it exists in this area.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so no, it does not. There is no design review standards for this area. There are some review requirements for other zoning in the North Fair Oaks area. And there's extensive, standards for, NMU, CMU zones. But this is a small patch of R3, as the architect said, is a transition area from the commercial facing El Camino Real into the residential zones, and it does not have any design guidelines or design review requirements.
Okay. Okay. And that's, yeah. And that it can be an issue sometimes because there is a transition needed, and sometimes those buildings that are in the transition look differently than the buildings on either side, the more intense buildings that might be on El Camino or the less intense buildings that are in the R1 single family neighborhood. So they truly do form that transition, and they don't look exactly like either one. They have kind of their own look. So I do think what I would like to do today is continue this. I very definitely, and I see Mr. Mansky would like to say a little bit more, but let me finish saying what I'm saying, and then I'll ask for your comments, Mr. Mansky. What I would like to do is continue this meeting to February 4th and allow the time for the North Fair Oaks Community Council to hear this item on, I think that's what, January 28th, and then we'll reconvene. I would encourage both Mr. Mansky and Mr. Barras to attend the North Fair Oaks Community Council meeting along with the applicants and your design team and to hopefully even meet before that meeting if you can, to talk about these concerns and determine where there might be some middle ground and some areas where you can come to some agreement on. And then I would also like to ask Noah to send us all the arborist report so that we can read through that before that January 28th North Fair Oaks Community Council meeting, and certainly before the next zoning hearing officer meeting. So, Mr. Mansky, did you? Yeah.
Yes. Earlier you mentioned the list of people you would like that arborist report sent to. Please also send that to the North Fair Oaks Community Council.
Yeah, it'll be as part of the staff report for the North Fair Oaks Community Council.
Thank you, Kanoy, and thank you also for answering some of my questions this week. This is all very complicated for people like us because we're not used to dealing with all the codes and so on and so forth. So your answers were appreciated.
Sure, yeah.
Regarding,
if all of you who would like a copy of the arborist report, if you can email me, that'd be the best way to get all that information over to you. My information is on the agenda, so you can just email me and I'll send that arborist report out to you.
That would be great. Thank you.
So regarding the comments on transition, there's and sensitivity and sensitivity to the craft of architecture and development is, there's two ways I think to look at that word transition. One, in terms of codes, an example, R1, where all the houses have a design standard based on an approximately 1941 development of a subdivision. 2, R3, that got a zoning rights of multi-family sometime throughout history and has never had any kind of standards applied to it. And then, of course, the next property, which is now under the zoning of NMU, which I share with you that in 2016, 17, and 18, I was on the North Fair Oaks Phase 2 zoning work group that developed the standards for NMU. And that included everything from footprint to design standards of building. So we're not that young and fresh to understanding that when the North Fair Oaks Community Plan of 2011 was adopted, and when these new NMU standards were adopted, the county recognized the importance of integration of a property into its surrounding. That was always a deep part of the conversation, not necessarily driven by residents, but driven by a vision for the county that there would be aesthetically harmonious relationships between things. And I think the important thing is to understand that it's hard not to look at 20 Dexter as integrated with the neighborhood, because it is integrated with the neighborhood. It is right on one of the main entryways into the neighborhood. It's not coming off the alley. It's not coming off El Camino Real. Its driveway and its visual structure on all angles, except for the angle of the alley, is in fact part of the neighborhood. So why would not an architect want to take pride in their craft that the transition between a neighborhood and the El Camino Real business corridor isn't one that is a smooth transition. So the idea for me of seeing 20 Dexter look like an extension of El Camino Real is it just seems like not only aesthetically wrong, but myself, who has been a graphic designer my whole life, it just seems the right thing to do, regardless of the codes on paper, to have a transition that works, to leaving a lasting legacy of contributing to a neighborhood rather than assaulting it. And Eric, the architect, felt a little insulted by my initial words, but during that process, didn't express any sympathy for our concerns, just their right to follow whatever is recorded on paper that they're allowed to do. And that's all I have to say on that matter. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your comments. Okay, well, I do think, unless there's somebody who would like to say something that hasn't yet been raised, if there's a new concern or issue, I think what I will do is continue this to February 4th, 2021. And it will, with the understanding that this will go to the North Fair Oaks Community Council on January 28th, 2021. And that people who want to have the arborist report will email Kanoa Kelly, and he will get you copies of that arborist report, and he will also get that to the North Fair Oaks Community Council. And that I do also encourage the applicant and the applicant's team, including the architect, to talk with the neighbors who have these concerns and who express them so clearly, to try to talk and see if there are some ways to address those concerns, because I will be asking about that on February 4th when we come back. Yeah, Mr. Mansky, I see you've unmuted yourself.
Yes, this is a new issue, and
Okay.
it's to help us understand, because there's a huge conversation that's happening in our neighborhood about this. People were just unfortunately unable to attend today. And one of the questions that was asked was the zoning hearing meeting that we are at today. Is this meeting occurring because there is a subdivision of a parcel from what would be generally a one owner that then rents to a multiple owner? Or is this zoning meeting because there's a new development and we deserve to be informed?
Well, it's both. There is it is a subdivision. It's a 4-lot townhouse subdivision. And Kanoa, correct me if I'm misstating it. And the neighborhood is informed and deserves to be informed of that subdivision. It's not for necessarily the design review of the building, but it is for the subdivision. Now, Kanoa, you can add to that or correct me if I misstated that.
No, that's correct. That's why we're here, is because of the minor subdivision. The minor subdivisions have to go to the ZHO for a public hearing, and so that's why we're all here today.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that these concerns that you brought up cannot or should not be addressed, but it means that there is some limit to what either the staff can recommend or what I, as the zoning hearing officer, can decide on as part of this project. And I think your comments about transition into the neighborhood are well stated and well founded. I think we'll want to talk more about that on February 4th and kind of what that North Fair Oaks plan calls for and allows in terms of what we might be able to do and with working with the applicant and the architect. There are limitations when design review isn't in place or isn't part of the review process. There are more limits on what either staff or I can do in terms of what the building looks like. So we'll need to review some of those sections of the North Fair Oaks community plan as well. And you might find out when you get to the North Fair Oaks Community Council, because they're held to some of those same, they are held to all of those same standards. And so there might be some limits as to what they can do as well. But there's certainly room for negotiation and discussion and neighbors working with the applicant's team. So Mr. Kang, I noticed you've unmuted yourself.
I just a very quick statement. So I appreciate that all the inputs that we're not playing the vocabulary games to try to attack each other. So I'm really open to have this communication meeting because of this pandemic. I hope that Mr. Maskey can arrange this meeting if there are other people in the neighborhood wanting to communicate. I personally hesitate to go into any meetings in this period of time, but this Zoom meeting is really convenient, and also we can have multiple times. If someone can arrange the meeting, I will be available to talk to whoever are willing to. It can be more than once before the community meeting, so we can have a better communication, and in that we can directly exchange ideas. So I think if we overcome the first line of the defense, then eventually we're going to get to the critical point and come up the common grounds. I think that's really helpful.
Okay.
So, if Canola can help to pass my information or whoever can arrange this meeting, then I'm pretty much open all the time. Then even in the evening, I'm okay. If all the neighbors are willing to do that.
Okay, great. That would be very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kang. I appreciate that. I see Kanoa is unmuted, and if you'd like to add something, and then Mr. Mansky, I see you're unmuted too. So after Kanoa,
yeah. So I can definitely schedule a maybe a community meeting via Zoom, so that everybody can give their feedback. Right now, it's a little unclear as to what the objections are to the aesthetics. Is it just the height? Is it the materials? The articulation, the way it looks on the outside. So if we can get some, concrete feedback from everybody, maybe there's some compromises to be made or some things that we can implement in the final design to make it fit into the neighborhood that everybody will be satisfied with. But we can definitely hold a community meeting and get more details from all of you.
that would be fantastic. Thank you, Kanoa. And now Mr. Mansky. Did you want?
This is maybe a question that's way down the road, but it's a question that came up by several neighbors in assessing the project. With a subdivision of this nature, with a common area, how does this work regarding shared management of responsibility for retaining a property? So an example, are there 4 owners and then a homeowners group?
Yeah, that's typically how it is. There's a homeowners association that takes care of the grounds, all of the owners. So all 4 units are going to be sold off to different owners. So they're under different ownership. And they all pay into the HOAs for maintenance of the grounds, any other agreements that with the county to maintain things in the public right of way, maintain that shared driveway, things like that. So yes, that's how it works with an HOA.
Okay, thanks, Kanoa. All right, I think there is a plan in place, and that would be great if we can follow through with that before the North Fair Oaks Community Council meeting and before we come back here on February 4th of 2021. And I think we've made some progress to figure out what the concerns are, and I hope that they can be worked out before we come back. So, but we'll certainly be talking more about it on February 4th. So with that, unless there's anything else that we need to cover, I'm going to give just a couple seconds for people to unmute if you've got anything else you want to add. Okay, I want to thank everybody for taking the time and really addressing these concerns. So I will look forward to seeing everybody on February 4th of 2021. And do have good holiday seasons. So take care, and I am adjourning the December 17th, 2020 zoning hearing officer meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.